Ja, hej och välkomna till tankesmedjan Arena Idés samtalsserie 10 samtal klockan 10 som vi har haft nu de senaste månaderna på vår Facebook-sida där vi samtalar med olika experter om aktuella samhällsfrågor. Jag heter Isabella Martins Gravengiser och är praktikant på Arena Idé och annars är jag student på masterprogrammet i statsvetenskap på Stockholms universitet. Och idag ska jag samtala med Hugo Fanton som just nu befinner sig i Tyskland. Men vanligtvis är han på universitetet i São Paulo. Och Hugo är postdoktor i statsvetenskap och forskar om relationer mellan sociala rörelser, näringsliv och staten. Och vårt samtal idag kommer handla om de stora protesterna som varit nu under pandemin i Latinamerika, speciellt i Brasilien där cykelbud har strejkat för bättre arbetsvillkor. Och det här samtalet kommer vara på engelska, men ni får jättegärna ställa frågor på svenska i chatten under samtalet så kommer jag och översätta till Hugo. So Hugo, I'm very glad to have you here today, and this subject is something that I'm very interested in because in the beginning of this year I was living in São Paulo and I saw how the situation for the delivery workers became more acute due to the pandemic, and which later led to this large protest, and they were mainly organized by a group called Entregadores Antifascistas. And I wanted to start by asking you if you could tell us a little bit in general about the protest and what led up to them, and maybe about this group for the public that is not aware of what happened.
Yes, thank you. I'm very happy to be here, to be with the invitation and to talk about Brazil, about our social movements, unions, and struggles. So thank you. So to explain, I think it's important to say that in May, June, and July, these months were quite agitated politically in Brazil, with the increasing number of cases and deaths by COVID, also the economic and social impacts of measures, and the negationist speech from Bolsonaro, quite similar to how Trump dealt with the pandemic. Different sectors on this contest starts to protest and protest in different ways at home during the presidential speeches or going to the streets. And was under the flags anti-fascist and anti-racist. So also under the influence of the protests that were happening in United States. So between May and July, there were protests in the streets, and it was quite surprising. We from the traditional social movements and unions we weren't expecting these protests, but they started to be organized by different groups. For example, we had a large protest led by football fans organizations. That was something. They are strong associations in Brazil, but they are only related to football normally. In the 80s, they participate in protests for democracy, but since then, we never had this kind of experience, and it happened in June under this flag, anti-fascist and for democracy. So during this protest, one of the delivery workers leaders, Paulo Lima, joined those protests and started this collective called Delivery Workers Anti-Fascists, the Entregadores Antifascistas, as you already told. So they participate on those protests and became known by their speech on this protest. So and they get stronger, being recognized, being recognized as leaderships from the workers. So I think for me, the protests by delivery workers that took place in July, they are related to those factors. There was more than 2 months of the adoption of economic and social distance measures from the pandemic. This worsened the conditions and the overexploitation over delivery workers. So the conditions to work were badly, but in the other hand, there was a better social recognition from the importance of this kind of work, and that these conditions should change. They need better working conditions to work, and so this combination of having protests starting, they started to organize, to participate on those protests, the worsening of working conditions, and also the experience, in one hand, worsening working conditions, but in the other hand, being better recognized the working importance, the delivery work importance. So this combination of factors, I think, that produced the protests in July, and not only produced the protests, but the higher impact of those protests. They were able to mobilize a big number of delivery workers. They had the means for that because they were before organized on those anti-fascist groups. So I think we can explain what happened by these different factors that came together on that time.
Yes, because as you say, they managed to organize a very large amount of delivery workers, and previously I have seen that it's a struggle for unions or to organize this group, because maybe they don't have a physical place that they meet, or they don't have a way to communicate. But as you mentioned, this one delivery worker, Paulo Gado, became very essential for this movement, and they produced a lot of content for social media that became viral. Do you think this is this made the success of the way that they organized? Is it a new way, or is it something that we have seen before, or connected to the other movements? Or?
Yes, I think it was very, very important. We have in Brazil a kind of we have experience, the unions and the movements, they have experience organizing informal workers, because the informality working rates in Brazil are historically very high, affecting large sectors of the population. In many contexts, even the number of informal workers has exceeded half of the workforce, for example. We are getting these numbers now with the unemployment and the economic crisis. Almost half of population is in informality. Half of the workforce is in informality conditions. So this, the unions traditionally, in a relationship with the social movements, they organize work not only from the workplace, what is more traditional, but also there we have experiences in organizing from the neighborhoods and where the workers lives, or to develop new kinds of organizations to try to overcome these fragmentary conditions. One example is we have a good experience in São Paulo related to the street vendors. We have a forum that coordinated by unions, social movements, with the participation of street vendors. And by this forum, we organize them. They are also fragmented and living in terrible conditions. And through this forum, we organize protests and against the criminalization of their work, against for authorization of commerce in some city areas. So we have this this experience. But for now, this what happened was quite new because because as you said, this is a specific case of protests by delivery workers. In this case, the social media was fundamental. They weren't connected to the main unions and social movements. They started to organize themselves by themselves. And in Paulo Galo participated on those anti-fascist protests, and he made speeches denouncing the working conditions that they were facing. And this through the social media, this viralized. Everybody get access to their to his call for protesting and to face this situation, to struggle against this situation. And it's important to say as well how it happens that I don't know how it is in Sweden, but in Brazil, we have WhatsApp groups for everything. Everybody participates in WhatsApp groups for everything. And it's not different between the delivery workers. They already had their groups in WhatsApp to discuss the weather, the traffic, or some problem in the city. They were used to talk about the daily life issues through these groups. So they already had this network through social media. What happened is that they used those groups to talk about the protests and to mobilize. So and then they were able to, through social media, involve and mobilize a big number of delivery workers. And for me, I think now what a good way to keep on this struggle is to combine these different experiences of struggle. The more traditional, that involves the relation with unions, social movements, these kind of forums that we have experience in organizing, with these new kinds of ways to mobilize and related to social media and other tools that we have access.
And have you seen any effects? What was the demands? Did they have clear demands that they wanted to change? And was it a change in legislation, or was it? And have you seen any effects of that?
So basically, the demands were related to working conditions. They are in a situation of overexploitation. I think this is quite similar all around the world. It's not, it's not different in São Paulo than it is by you. And what they were calling, it was so to have a better minimum payment for the deliveries, and also an increase in the value of work per kilometer that they move in the city. Also, the end of blockages without rights to defense, because they are blocked when sometimes by the apps. Sometimes it's unfair. It's just a kind of pressure over them, and they are demanding the end of this kind of.
What does it mean to be blocked by that?
It's when, for example, when they have to deliver a food from a restaurant to a consumer, and for the restaurant. be delayed in giving them the package that they have to deliver. And sometimes when they don't attend the time to deliver, established to them to deliver the product, they are blocked by the app, and they have to wait for 1 hour to be able to have another to start to work again. So they
is it used as a punishment, or?
Yes, it's a punishment from the companies. It's like when they don't do their work in the time that the company establishes, they are punished by being blocked by being impossible to get new customers for a while, for a certain period. And normally this is a kind of this is a way to pressure them to run. To run, and this is very bad for their. We know that in Brazil the number of deaths in traffic by the workers are very high, and is related to that because they are pressured to go faster and faster to deliver the food. And this is a measure that this is a demand to regulate that and to stop that, this kind of to making possible to the apps to do this kind of pressure over them. And also they have demands related to health, insurance, security during the pandemic, health security during the pandemic. This kind of demands. They have there is bills in the Congress that deal with those issues. So they are demanding the approval of a regulation, a working regulation. And actually, after the protests, they were invited for a meeting with the lower house speaker, Rodrigo Maia, and this meeting was a kind of Rodrigo Maia was committed to the advancement of the bills, but we are not seeing it. PT, the Works Party, has a proposal. It's called. It's a bill that establishes the guidelines of a national union, national urban mobility policy, and this policy guarantee rights for them, like. Research to pay costs of protective equipment, insurance, the prohibition of these abusive pressures that adopted by the company. So there is already a bill in the Congress, not only one, there are more than 50 bills, but they are not advancing because we are facing a very bad context in the institutional level. It's the opposite what's happening. We are facing the deregulation of all the working conditions in all sectors. Not so it's a very hard contest to deal with, and this demands more struggles, more protests to pressure to advance this bill, these proposals.
Yes, I just wanted to ask you before changing a little bit the theme, because here in Sweden we have also seen a consumer perspective to this debate, where some have argued that consumers should avoid to use these apps that we know have bad working conditions. and do a boycott. Do you see that as an alternative, or do you see that would worsen the situation?
Yes, we had this. This was present during those protests. I think it is important. The leaders of the protest made two calls for the workers stoppage, and also for the consumers to not place orders in the days. There were two protest days, in 1st July and in 25th July. Mm-hmm. And they called for, they tried to organize the workers to not work on those days, and also called for the consumers to not place orders. I think this is something quite new, because normally the unions focus on all efforts in mobilizing workers, and often we have difficulties in establishing a broader dialogue with society. In the case of these protests was different. They were widely commented by consumers on platforms, on social media like Twitter. There was an increase in the visibility of their struggles, of their protests. Consumers also accessed the online stores, the homepages, the stores' homepages, and to denounce and criticize the working conditions and the exploitation, the working exploitation. So I think this is very important. Economically, what really impacts capital is the strike, is the stoppage. Mm-hmm. But so I don't know in economic terms how big is the impact of a consumer boycott. But in the ideological battle, in political and social terms, I think this is very important. And this coordination between workers and consumers in a struggle, I think it's important. And this protest that we had shown it to us, the visibility of their struggles, the impact of their struggles get higher because involved not only them, but also the consumers denouncing the conditions.
Yes, I got a question from Facebook, and where Helena is interested in when you talked about the football clubs, that they were involved in the organization. She found this interesting, and she wanted to ask if you can tell us a little bit more about the football clubs.
The football clubs.
Yes,
this was very surprising. In Brazil, I don't know how it is in Sweden, but in Brazil, since the 60s or 70s, the football fans of a football team, they organize themselves to support the team, to denounce corruption in the team. There are associations of fans related to the football dynamics. They go to the football matches, they support the team, they protest when the football team is not going well. And so we have in Brazil this kind of civil society participation in football. During the 80s, one of these, the biggest football team association called Gaviões da Fiel, they are Corinthians fans. Corinthians is a football team. I think they know, you know. I hope so.
Yeah, I know.
And they were important in the struggles for democracy in Brazil. During the football matches, they called for it. They had flags asking for democracy. So they were important on that contest. But since then, we never had this kind of involvement again. just in the World Cup, but from the right. During the World Cup here in Brazil, the middle classes in the stadiums with Brazilian flags started protests against PT government on that moment.
Yes, for those that doesn't know, yes, they used the football T-shirts as a way of support Bolsonaro.
As a way to support Bolsonaro. They use this too. The right is using the Brazilian flags and the football, as Isabella already told. And and now what was surprised is that they suddenly in May and June they started to announce a protest, and until then we didn't have organized any protest during the pandemic. We were at home. From the movement we were facing a very hard situation because for example, I am more involved with housing movements. And
yes, I didn't mention that in my introduction, but you, besides of being a political scientist, you're also very involved in several social movements in Brazil.
Yes, and during the pandemic, the number of evictions get higher in São Paulo, in Brazil. It is a terrible situation. And we were on that time discussing how could we struggle against it with these social distance measures and being unable to go to the streets. That is the way that we know how to protest against. And so we were on that situation, and suddenly these football associations, they start mobilizing, and they organize a very big protest in the end of May, I think, or beginning of June, with this anti-fascist flag. And this kind of associations, they are very, they have a very strong connection with this informal sector of workers. They mobilize those sectors. They are not middle classes organizations, or they are connected with the popular, what we call here in Brazil, the popular classes. And so we had mobilizations organized and with participation of popular classes, and the delivery workers joined it and became a known participate on those protests. So these football fans associations, they kept their protests. We joined. We organized together some protests as well in July. But now, since then, we didn't went back to the streets to protest, because it was a change also because Bolsonaro in March, April, he started a movement against the Brazilian institutions, against democracy, and these protests were related to that. And he moved back. Bolsonaro now is not, for now, he's not pushing their supporters against the democratic institutions, the less of democratic institutions that we have. It's so with this change of position, this kind of protest also stopped. I don't know how it will be in the next months, but that's what's happened. And,
yes, we have to see. But we have to end now. But I think we touched on very different aspects of this, and that the delivery workers' issues are not only theirs, and that it's a common struggle from several parts, including the football clubs that I didn't know of. So thank you so much, Hugo, and everybody that have watched. we will continue to have this 10 samtal, so you can continue watching them. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was very nice to be here, and we keep in touch when you...
Yes.